Dominic followed Lily into the dim, airless alley, his eyes sweeping fast over every tucked-away corner, every shadow hiding between moss-stained brick walls. Behind them, the footsteps of 50 underlings hammered against cracked concrete, the sound rolling outward like waves through the narrow space. Marco issued orders and clipped hand signals, and the men in black suits fanned out like ghosts, combing every twist and recess, tipping over trash bins, shining flashlights into every gap in the wall. Lily held Dominic's hand tightly. Her small fingers still trembled, but her steps did not falter. "This way," she whispered, tugging him to the left when the alley split. "I remember that blue trash bin. Mom and I used to pass it all the time." Dominic followed the direction Lily pointed. There it was, a large blue bin sitting awkwardly beside a wall drowned in graffiti, messy shapes smeared and blotched beneath the weak spill of streetlight. They turned into the deeper branch of the alley. The stench of rotting garbage hit them hard. Filthy water pooled into pitch-black puddles underfoot. Then Lily stopped abruptly. Her eyes went wide, and a scream tore out of her small throat. "Mom." Dominic looked where she was looking, and it felt as if someone's fist closed around his heart. A woman was tied to a rusted water pipe. Her head drooped forward, black hair tangled and spilling over her face. Her body was motionless. Her lips had turned a bruised shade beneath the thin light. The rope had bitten deep into her wrists, so deep that blood had dried into dark streaks against her pale skin. He was moving before he could think. He yanked a folding knife from the inside pocket of his coat and dropped to his knees beside her. Marco started forward to help, but Dominic snapped. "Stay where you are," in a voice that allowed no argument. Dominic cut through the rope, one strand at a time, careful as if he were handling something priceless, the blade sliding across rough fibers without ever grazing her skin. When the final strand gave way, the woman's body pitched forward, and Dominic caught her, his arms lifting her gently, as if he were lifting a child. She was still unconscious. Her breathing was faint, a thin warmth against his chest. He saw her face clearly for the first time in Marco's flashlight, and something in his ribcage flared with a sharp, aching sting. She was thin, drawn, washed in exhaustion, and yet even like this, he could see the stubborn strength in the lines of her features. This was the woman who had shouted for her daughter to run, instead of begging for herself. "Mom! Mom! Wake up!" Lily rushed in, her tiny hands patting at her mother's cheeks, tears spilling in streams. "Mom, it's me. I found someone to help." And as if her daughter's voice carried some kind of miracle, Elena Vasquez slowly opened her eyes, those warm brown eyes clouded for a moment. Then, when she recognized Lily right beside her, she broke down crying. "Baby," she whispered, her voice raw with fatigue. "My little girl." Mother and daughter clung to each other. Lily sobbed against her mother's arms, and Elena held her tight, as if she feared someone might rip the child away. Dominic rose to his feet and stepped back, giving them space, but he could not look away. Something inside his chest softened. Layers of ice from the past 3 years cracked under the sight of a mother and her child finding each other again. Then Elena lifted her head, and her eyes met Dominic's gray eyes for the first time. What did she see in them? A notorious Mafia boss? A cold-blooded killer? No. She saw gentleness, unexpected and deep, hidden behind a shell of steel. She saw pain, and she saw relief, as if finding her mattered to him even more than it did to her. "Thank you," Elena whispered, her voice shaking. "Thank you for saving." Dominic shook his head, cutting her off. "Do not thank me yet. You need medical care." He turned toward Marco and delivered a short command with his eyes, but Marco did not look back. Dominic's right arm, loyal for 20 years, stood there staring. He had watched his boss kneel to cut a strange woman loose. He had watched the look in his boss's eyes as he faced that mother and child, and he murmured to the man beside him in a voice that could not hide his disbelief. 20 years following the boss. I have never seen him like this. Dominic lifted Elena into his arms with a gentleness that left her no time to refuse, and he moved quickly toward the Maybach waiting at the mouth of the alley. Marco hurried to open the car door, his eyes still crowded with confusion as he watched his boss behave like an entirely different man. Elena tried to struggle in Dominic's hold, weak and instinctive, her voice a thin rasp from exhaustion. "You do not have to do this. I can walk on my own. Just take us to the nearest hospital." But Dominic did not slow. He settled her into the back seat of the Maybach, then turned and picked up Lily as well, the little girl so drained she was nearly dozing against his shoulder. "Not the hospital," Dominic said, brief and final, as he slid into the seat across from them and signaled the driver to go. To my house. Elena forced herself upright, her brown eyes widening with shock and fear. Your house. No, that is not okay. We do not know you. I cannot accept that kind of debt from a stranger. She pulled Lily closer, the mother's instinct rising hard and fierce even as her body sagged with fatigue. You have already done too much. Please stop at some street corner. We will get home ourselves. Dominic looked directly into her eyes. His gray gaze was cold as steel, yet his voice carried an authority that could not be argued with. Tonight you need to be safe. My personal doctor will examine you and the girl. Tomorrow we decide what comes next. It was not an offer. It was not a negotiation. It was a command. Elena opened her mouth to protest again, but then she looked down at Lily curled against her, the small face still marked with tear tracks and grime, her breathing finally steady in the deep sleep of utter exhaustion. Elena did not have the strength to fight anymore. The Maybach glided through the streets of Chicago, leaving the broken weariness of the South Side behind and heading north, where the buildings grew more elegant, where the roads grew cleaner, where the night itself seemed quieter. Elena held Lily tightly, her eyes never stopping as she studied the man seated across from her in the darkness of the car. Who was he? How could he summon 50 men in 15 minutes in the dead of night? Why did those cold eyes hold the deep pain she had seen when he cut her loose? Dominic said nothing. He only watched the window, but every so often his gaze slid back to the two of them, as if to make sure they were still there, still breathing, still safe. About 20 minutes later, the car stopped before a massive iron gate, at least 3 meters tall, its ornate patterns gilded and shimmering under the lights. Elena sat straighter, her breath catching as the gate began to swing open and the Maybach rolled inside. A vast garden spread out before her, trees trimmed into neat lines, a marble fountain set in the middle of a lawn so green it looked unreal, and at the end of a white gravel drive stood an enormous Italian-style villa, warm golden light pouring from tall windows as if it were calling them in. Elena could not believe what she was seeing. She had lived 28 years in cramped apartments, in miserable rooms with cracked walls and broken heaters, and now she was riding in $1 million car into a place that looked like a castle from movies she had never dared to imagine living inside. The car stopped at the front entrance. An elderly butler in a perfectly tailored black suit was already waiting, bowing his head as Dominic stepped out. Marco opened the door for Elena and Lily, then leaned toward Dominic, his voice low enough that only the two of them could hear. Boss, I have been with you for 20 years. This is not like you. You never bring strangers home. Dominic did not answer. He only stood there, his gray eyes following Elena as she carried Lily up the marble steps, the butler guiding them with quiet courtesy into the villa. Warm golden light gathered around the silhouettes of mother and child, and Dominic realized that for the first time in 3 years, this house no longer felt cold. It no longer felt empty. Dr. Sophia Chen arrived only 15 minutes after they stepped into the villa. A woman of Asian descent, about 40 years old, with black hair neatly tied back and eyes that were calm, steady, professional. She carried a black leather bag filled with medical tools, and she began examining Elena right there in the grand living room, where a crystal chandelier poured warm light onto a deep red velvet sofa. Elena sat still while Dr. Chen checked the wounds on her wrists, the bruised marks along her arms and her back. Then, with careful hands, she bandaged each scrape the rope had left behind. Nothing serious, Dr. Chen said to Dominic, who stood a few steps away, her voice gentle but precise. These are surface injuries, some bruises. They will take about 1 week to heal. I will prescribe pain medication and anti-inflammatory medicine. Elena whispered her thanks, but her eyes kept searching for Lily. A maid had taken the little girl to bathe. When Lily came back to the living room about half an hour later, Elena almost did not recognize her own daughter. Lily was clean and sweet-smelling. Her brown curls had been washed and dried until they looked soft and full. She was wearing a pale pink silk pajama set, so smooth that she kept touching the fabric again and again, her wide eyes bright with disbelief. Mom, touch this. Lily ran to Elena, her voice full of excitement even though her body was drained. It is so soft, Mom. Like a cloud. I have never worn anything this soft. Elena pulled her child into her arms, and her throat tightened until it hurt. She thought of the old clothes she bought from second-hand stores, the ones Lily wore again and again. Shirts worn thin at the shoulders, shorts with hems that sat too high because Lily grew faster than Elena could afford. And now her daughter was here, in a lavish villa, wearing silk pajamas that might cost more than Elena's entire month of pay. A servant brought a tray of light food for Lily, buttered toast, Warm milk, a little fruit cut into pieces. Lily ate hungrily, as if she had never tasted anything so good. And maybe she truly had not. Dominic watched from a distance, his gray eyes never leaving the mother and child, but he did not come closer, as if he understood they needed space. After Lily finished eating, a servant led them upstairs to a bedroom on the second floor. The room was spacious. A king-size bed dressed in pure white sheets, heavy velvet curtains, a private bathroom lined with marble. Lily climbed onto the bed, slipped under the thick blanket, and almost immediately fell asleep, her lips still curved in a satisfied smile. Elena sat beside her, looking at the small, peaceful face in sleep, and for the first time tonight, she allowed herself to cry. Not from fear, not from pain. She cried from relief, from gratitude, from the simple truth that her daughter was safe, cared for in a way Elena had never been able to give. Tears ran down her cheeks and soaked into the pillow. Elena stayed like that until she felt emptied out, but she could not sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the dark shapes of the three attackers. She felt the rope biting into her wrists. She heard Lily screaming in the night. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Elena gently left the bed. She tucked the blanket snugly around Lily, then stepped out of the room, intending to go downstairs to the kitchen for a glass of water. The villa was silent in the night. Only moonlight slipped through the tall glass windows along the hallway. Elena walked barefoot on the cool oak floor, trying to remember the way to the kitchen the servants had shown her earlier. She turned into a large room she thought was the kitchen, but it was the living room, and she was not alone. Dominic sat in a leather armchair by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes fixed on the Chicago night sky. He had not changed. He was still wearing the black shirt from earlier, only the tie removed, a few buttons at the collar undone. Moonlight cut across his sharp features, bringing out the faint scar on his left eyebrow and the gray eyes heavy with thought. Elena froze in the doorway, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. Dominic turned to look at her, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other in silence. No one spoke. The room felt as if time had stopped breathing. Then Elena spoke first, her voice quiet in the stillness of the night. "Why did you help us? Who are you, that you can gather 50 men in 15 minutes in the middle of the night?" Dominic did not answer right away. He watched Elena in the doorway. Her black hair was a mess. Her face still carried the marks of exhaustion and fear, yet those warm brown eyes still held the stubborn strength of a mother who had walked through hell to protect her child. He lifted his hand and pointed to the chair across from him, an invitation that did not need words. Elena hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. She sat in the armchair, drew her legs up, and wrapped her arms around a pillow. She did not demand an answer. She simply waited. That patience startled Dominic. He raised the whiskey to his lips and took a sip, letting the sharp warmth slide down his throat before he spoke. "I am Dominic Rossi," he said. "My family has controlled this city from the shadows for decades. You likely do not know my face, because I make sure the world does not see it. But the name Rossi, it opens doors." His voice low in the silent room. "That name probably means nothing to you, but in Chicago, it carries a certain weight." He paused. His gray eyes dropped to the glass, as if he were searching for something in the amber color. "My family. We are not good people by any ordinary definition. We control things people do not want spoken about in daylight." Elena listened in silence, showing no fear, no judgment. Maybe after what she had survived tonight, there was not much left in the world that could frighten her. Dominic looked at her, and something in that steady gaze made him want to keep talking, made him want to tell her what he had never told anyone outside his family. Tonight, when Marco had to slam on the brakes because a child threw herself blindly into the road, she did not care about the car hitting her. She only cared about getting help, he said slowly, each word drawn from the deepest place in his chest. "When she looked at me with those eyes, begging me to save her mother, I did not see her." He stopped and took a long breath. "I saw myself, 26 years ago." Elena leaned forward slightly, her brown eyes fixed on him. She did not speak, but all her attention settled on the story he was about to lay down, and Dominic told her. For the first time, he told it to someone outside the family. "When I was 10, my mother was kidnapped." His voice stayed level, almost as if he were talking about someone else. "Her name was Maria Rossi, a gentlewoman, always smiling, always pulling me into her arms when I was afraid. My father's rivals took her for ransom, $1 million. Back then it was a fortune, but it was not something the Rossi family did not have." He set the whiskey down on the table, his hands laced together. His eyes went distant, out the window, as if he were staring straight into the past. I begged my father. I got on my knees, crying, pleading with him to pay, to save her. Do you know what my father said? Elena shook her head, her breath catching. He said, "The Rossi family does not negotiate with enemies. If we pay today, tomorrow they will take someone else. That is the principle." Dominic's voice turned bitter. Principle. He let my mother die for principle. A heavy silence filled the room. Elena lifted a hand to her mouth. Her eyes shone with tears. 3 days later, they found my mother's body in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. Dominic went on, and now his voice was only a whisper. And do you know what the worst part was? My father would not let me cry. He said a Rossi son cannot be weak, cannot show emotion, cannot let the enemy see pain. So I stood there, 10 years old, watching my mother's coffin sink into the ground, and I was not allowed to shed a single tear. He looked up at Elena, and in those cold gray eyes she saw pain that had never healed. Tonight, when the little girl looked at me with that pleading gaze, I saw that 10-year-old child, the child who begged grown men to save his mother, and I promised myself I would not fail the way my father failed me. Elena wiped at her tears, her voice tight. "I am sorry. I did not know." Dominic shook his head. "You do not have to be sorry. There is one more person I want to tell you about." He reached for the phone on the table, opened a photograph, and handed it to Elena. In the picture was a young woman with long black hair. Her eyes looked exactly like Dominic's, but there was warmth in them, a playful spark Elena had never seen in him. "My sister, Sophia," Dominic said, and his voice softened when he spoke the name. "The only person in this family I truly loved. She was not like me, not like my father. She had a gentle heart, always laughing, always believing in something good. She was the only light in my dark life." He took the phone back, stared at the photo for a long moment, then put it away. 3 years ago, Sophia died of cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to her last breath. His hand tightened. Before she died, she made me promise her one thing. She said, "Do not freeze your heart. Promise me, you will find someone to love. Do not live like a corpse." Dominic looked straight into Elena's eyes. "I promised, and I broke that promise every day for 3 years, until tonight." He did not say anything else, but Elena understood. She began to see the real man behind the frightening coldness, not a ruthless boss, but a child orphaned by his mother, a brother who had lost his sister, a heart locked in ice, trying to find its way back to warmth. Silence stretched after Dominic's story, but it was not a heavy silence. It was the kind of quiet that gives two souls room to find each other in the dark. Elena looked at the man across from her, and for the first time she did not see fear, or distance, or something untouchable. She saw a child without a mother, just like her. "You told me your story," Elena said softly, her voice still rough from crying. "Maybe I should tell you mine." Dominic said nothing. He only tipped his head slightly, an invitation without words, his gray eyes steady on her in the moonlight slipping through the window. Elena drew in a deep breath, and she began. For the first time, she told it fully. No hiding, no polishing, no pretty lies. "I do not know who my parents are. I was found in a cardboard box outside St. Mary's orphanage when I was only a few days old. No papers, no letter, nothing except a thin blanket wrapped around me." A small, bitter laugh left her, a sound that never reached her eyes. "I grew up in that orphanage for 18 years. Every year, couples would come in, looking at us children the way people look at products in a grocery store. And every year I hoped, but they always chose the younger ones, the cuter ones, the ones with fewer problems. I was told I was too old, that people wanted a newborn, someone they could bond with from the beginning, not a child who already had a personality and memories." Elena pulled her legs up on the chair, hugged the pillow tighter, as if she were shielding herself from the sharp edges of the past. "When I turned 18, I had to leave because I was legally an adult. They gave me a small suitcase, a little money, and they wished me luck. I did whatever I could to survive. Washing dishes, cleaning, waiting tables. Then I saved enough money to enroll in college. Interior design, that was my dream. To create beautiful homes for other people, because I had never had a real home myself." She stopped, swallowing hard, as if she had to push the pain down before it could drown her. "When I was 20, I met Daniel Morrison. He was handsome, charming. He said sweet things I had never heard in my life. He promised he would give me a family, a home, a bright future, and I believed him. I believed him because I was starving to be loved, because I was so lonely I could not see the warning signs. Dominic listened, his eyes never leaving her, and Elena saw it, not pity, understanding. When I found out I was pregnant with Lily, Daniel changed completely. He became distant, irritable over small things. He would disappear for days and come home smelling like alcohol and a woman's perfume. I tried to hold on. I tried to believe that when the baby came, everything would be better. Elena let out a bitter breath, but it was not. When Lily was 1 year old, I woke up one morning, and Daniel was gone. His clothes, his things, everything. All he left was a note on the kitchen table. I was not born to be a father. Do not look for me. Elena wiped at a tear that had slipped down her cheek without her noticing. And that was not even the worst part. After he left, I found out he had left behind a huge gambling debt, owed to people you do not want to know. They came for the money, threatened me, broke things. I had to drop out of college. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs at once to pay the debt and raise my child. During the day, I cleaned office buildings. At night, I waited tables at Rosa's bar. Some weekends, I even took laundry work. Elena met Dominic's eyes, and in those warm brown eyes, he saw a warrior's fire. For 5 years, it was just the 2 of us against the whole world. I swore to myself I would never depend on anyone again. I would never let anyone have the power to abandon me, or my daughter. We do not need anyone. She paused, drawing in a slow breath. So when you ask why I refused help, why I kept insisting on going back to that miserable apartment, that is why. I am afraid to believe in someone and be betrayed again. Outside the window, the sky was changing from black to gray, the first thin light of dawn beginning to show along the horizon. They had been talking all night without realizing it. Dominic looked at Elena, thin, exhausted, yet strong in a way that was almost frightening, and he understood. He understood why she was so stubborn, why her eyes always carried that careful watchfulness, and he understood why, after everything, she could look at him not with fear or judgment, but with something quieter, something human. "We are more alike than I thought," Dominic said gently, his voice softening with the dawn light slowly filling the room. 2 lonely people, carrying old wounds, building high walls to protect ourselves. Elena looked at him, and for the first time, she truly smiled. "Maybe that is why you are the first person I have ever told this story to." Lily woke when the first rays of sunlight slipped through the velvet curtains and fell across her small face, buried in a pure white comforter. She sat up, rubbed her eyes, and needed a few seconds to remember where she was. This was not the familiar cramped apartment with cracked walls and the rattling, complaining heater. This was a vast room, with a ceiling that seemed to rise forever, and furnishings more luxurious than anything she had ever seen. Lily glanced to the side and saw her mother still asleep, her face peaceful for the first time in many months. The little girl slid gently off the bed. Her bare feet touched a thick, soft rug, and she began her adventure. The villa in daylight felt even more magical than it had at night. Lily walked along a long hallway lined with enormous oil paintings, fresh flower arrangements resting on gleaming wooden tables, and tall windows stretching from floor to ceiling so the sunlight could pour in. She touched everything with the wide-eyed wonder of a child stepping into a fairy tale for the very first time. Then she stopped in front of a door left slightly open. Light spilled from inside, laying a stripe of warm gold across the wood floor. Lily peeked in. She saw Dominic seated behind a large desk, frowning down at a stack of papers. His face was severe. His gray eyes were sharp with concentration. He looked nothing like the man who had knelt in front of her last night. Any other adult might have tiptoed away at the sight of that expression, but Lily was not an adult. She pushed the door open and walked in, skipping up to the desk, then tipping her chin up to look at Dominic with big brown eyes shining bright. "Uncle," she said, her clear voice breaking the heavy seriousness of the room. "Do you have any crayons? I like drawing." Dominic looked up. For a few seconds he simply stared, trying to process what had just happened. No one ever entered his office without knocking. No one ever spoke to him with that kind of natural ease, without fear. Even Marco, his loyal right hand for 20 years, always kept a certain respectful distance. But this 6-year-old girl stood here looking at him like he was just some ordinary uncle, asking for crayons as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Crayons," Dominic repeated, and there was a rare clumsiness in his voice. And then a memory rose in his mind. Sophia, his sister, had loved to draw too. He still had her set of colors. He had kept it after she died, stored in the cabinet in his office because he could not bring himself to throw it away, but he also could not bring himself to look at it. "Wait here a moment," he said. He stood and walked to the oak cabinet in the corner. When he opened the drawer and saw Sophia's box, something inside him pinched hard. It was still intact, just as she had left it. A few sticks worn down from use. A few still untouched. He picked up the box and drew in a slow breath to steady himself, then returned to the desk. "Here," he said, setting it down in front of Lily. "This was my sister's. She liked drawing too, just like you." Lily opened the box. Her eyes lit up when she saw all the colors arranged neatly inside. Then she looked around and spotted a stack of white paper on the desk. She grabbed a few sheets and dropped onto the floor right beneath the desk, legs folded, as comfortable as if she owned the place. "Come down and draw with me," she waved, her voice bright and casual, as if she were inviting a friend. Dominic looked at the little girl on the floor. He looked at the unfinished business papers. He looked back at those waiting brown eyes, and he did not understand why, but he sat down. The Mafia boss that all of Chicago feared sat on the expensive wood floor, took a blue crayon in his hand, and began to draw. They drew in silence for a few minutes. Lily drew a house with big windows and a row of flowers on the porch. Dominic struggled with something that even he did not know what it was supposed to be. Then Lily lifted her head to look at his drawing, and she burst into bright, ringing laughter. "Your drawing is so bad," she shouted, pointing at Dominic's crooked scribbles. "What is that? A dog or a tree?" Dominic looked at his own picture. Then he looked at Lily, laughing so hard she almost tipped over, and something miraculous happened. He laughed. Not the polite smile of social obligation, not the cold curve of victory across a negotiation table. A real laugh, from deep in his chest. The kind of laugh he thought he had forgotten how to make after 3 years without Sophia. Outside the door, Elena stood there with one hand resting on the frame. She had been searching for her daughter for 10 minutes, and she had finally followed the sound of a child's laughter to this place. But what she saw held her still. The powerful, frightening man from last night was sitting on the floor, clumsy with a crayon like a grown child, laughing with her daughter as if nothing in the world mattered more. Elena's heart wavered. Marco passed down the hallway, on his way to deliver the morning report to Dominic, but he stopped short when he saw the scene inside the office. His boss, the man he had followed for 20 years, the man the entire Chicago underworld feared, sitting on the floor coloring with a 6-year-old girl, laughing like he had never laughed before. Marco blinked a few times, as if he did not trust his own eyes. Then he turned away quietly, without disturbing them. Breakfast was served in the grand dining room, on a long oak table that could seat 20 people, but only 3 sat gathered at one corner. Lily ate with fierce hunger, finishing a plate of pancakes covered in honey and strawberries. Her eyes lit up with every bite, as if she had never tasted anything so good in her whole life. Elena sat beside her daughter, trying to eat, but her mind was spinning with hundreds of thoughts. Dominic sat across from them, glancing at mother and child now and then with an expression he did not fully understand himself. When breakfast ended and a servant led Lily out to see the flower garden, Elena stood. She smoothed the borrowed shirt that still hung loose on her thin frame, and she turned to face Dominic. "Mr. Rossi," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm, to stay steady. "I am truly grateful for what you have done for us. Last night, the doctor, the food, a place to sleep, all of it, but we need to go home." Dominic set his coffee cup down. His gray eyes held hers without blinking. "Home. Back to the South Side apartment where you were attacked last night. That is our home," Elena answered, her voice tightening. "And I have to work. Rosa needs me at the bar tonight. I have asked for too many nights off already. I cannot miss another one." She drew a deep breath, lifting her chin as if she were bracing for battle. "And I do not accept charity. I told you that already. I can take care of myself. For 5 years it has been only me, and I have been fine. I do not need saving." Dominic was silent for a moment. His eyes moved over Elena's face as if he were reading every thought she was trying to hide. Then he spoke, calm, but with a thread of concern he could not fully conceal. "The men who attacked you last night have not been caught. We do not know who they are. We do not know why they targeted you. Staying here a few more days will be safer, at least until we finish investigating." Elena shook her head. "Firm. I have lived in that neighborhood for 5 years, Mr. Rossi. I know how to protect myself. Maybe last night was just a random robbery, unlucky men who picked the wrong person." She knew how weak that sounded, even as she said it, but she could not stay here. She could not let herself get used to the soft bed, the good food, and the gentleness in the eyes of the man sitting across from her. She could not let Lily get used to this life and then have it torn away again. "My decision is final," Elena added, her voice clean and decisive. "Please respect it." Dominic looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. "All right. I respect your decision." He stood, took out his phone, spoke a few brief words, then looked back at Elena. "A car will take you and Lily home in 10 minutes. Elena let out a breath of relief. And yet, somewhere inside her, there was something else. A feeling she did not want to admit. Disappointment, because he had agreed so easily. She pushed it away and focused on preparing to leave this place. She did not know that the moment she turned her back, Dominic called Marco, his voice low and hard with command. "Put 4 men on her apartment, 24/7. 2 on days, 2 on nights. Have a patrol car pass the area every 2 hours. Anyone suspicious near the building, I want a report immediately." On the other end of the line, Marco was quiet for a moment, then asked carefully, "Does the boss want them to know?" "No," Dominic answered quickly. "She cannot know. None of them can let her notice." 10 minutes later, the black Maybach waited at the front entrance. Elena carried Lily to the car. The little girl still looked back with longing, reluctant to leave the flower garden and the bedroom that felt like a storybook dream. Dominic stood on the steps with his hands in his pockets, his face returned to its familiar coldness. But when Lily saw him, she suddenly wriggled out of her mother's arms and ran to him. She wrapped both arms around Dominic's leg, tilted her face up, and her brown eyes shone with tears. "Uncle," Lily whispered, her voice trembling, "will I get to see you again? I like drawing with you. I like it here." Dominic froze for a beat, as if he did not know how to respond. Then he lowered himself slowly, one knee to the ground, bringing himself to her eye level, just as he had done last night when he first met her on that dark street. He lifted a hand and wiped the tear slipping down Lily's cheek, a touch so gentle it hardly seemed like it could belong to him. "I promise," he said, and his voice softened in a way Marco, standing behind, could not believe. "I promise you will see me again." Lily smiled through her tears, then suddenly threw her arms around Dominic's neck. He held still, his body rigid for a second. Then, slowly, he lifted his hands and wrapped them around her small back. It was the first embrace he had received in 3 years, since Sophia had gone. Elena stood a few steps away, watching everything. She watched the powerful, frightening man kneel and hold her daughter. She watched the way he cherished Lily as if the child were the most precious thing in the world, and Elena's heart shook violently. In 5 years, no one had looked at her daughter that way. Daniel, Lily's biological father, had never even held the child long enough for her to remember the warmth of a father. But this stranger, in less than 1 day, had given Lily the thing she had craved through her entire small life, the steady care of a man. The Maybach stopped in front of the worn old building on the south side, and Elena stepped out with Lily in her arms, feeling as if she had just fallen from heaven onto the ground. She lifted her gaze to their 3rd-floor apartment. The window was still patched with tape from the time it had shattered last month. The balcony was rusted, with a few wilted plants in tired pots. The outer wall was stained with dark mildew. Only a little more than 1 day ago, she had never really noticed how broken this place looked. But after one night in a luxurious villa with ceilings that reached high into the air and sheets that felt like silk against the skin, everything became painfully clear. Lily was unusually quiet as they climbed the shaky stairs. Her small hand held tight to her mother's, but her eyes kept dropping to the old worn sandals on her feet. She did not ask why they had to come back. She did not cry. She did not beg. She simply followed, with the resigned calm of a child who had learned early that she would not always get what she wanted. Elena opened the apartment door, and the familiar smell of dampness rushed in. The small space, where the kitchen, living room, and bedroom were all pressed together into one, felt even smaller now. Old furniture crowded every corner. The walls were laced with cracks like spiderwebs. The heater in the corner had been broken since last winter, and the steady drip from the kitchen faucet still tapped out the same rhythm, like a sad little song. "Mom," Lily finally spoke, her voice very small. Uncle Dominic's room had such a soft carpet. Elena dropped to her knees and pulled her child into her arms, fighting the surge of feeling rising in her chest. "I know, baby, but this is our home." She kissed Lily's hair, then whispered, as if she were speaking to herself as much as to her daughter, "We will be okay. We always are." Life returned to its familiar rhythm. By day, Elena cleaned office buildings downtown, mopping floors, emptying trash, scrubbing toilets for people who probably earned in 1 hour what she earned in an entire month. By night, She worked at Rosa's bar, smiling at customers even when her feet ached and her eyes burned with sleeplessness. Lily stayed with Rosa's neighbor, waiting patiently for her mother as always. But something was different. Small changes began to appear. So subtle Elena almost missed them unless she looked closely. 3 days after they came home, Elena returned from work and found the broken window replaced. Not patched with tape the way she had always done. A completely new pane of glass, bright and clean. The frame had even been repainted a crisp white. Elena stood there staring, not understanding what had happened. She asked the landlord, an irritable old woman who always demanded rent on the exact day, and the woman only shrugged. Someone came to fix it, said it was free building maintenance. I did not ask questions. Then, at the end of the week, when Elena prepared the rent envelope like she did every month, the landlord showed up again with a strange look on her face. This month someone already paid the next 3 months too. The woman looked Elena up and down. You got yourself a new boyfriend with money. Elena did not know what to say. She stood there with the envelope still in her hand, her heart pounding hard and fast. The next day, a man in a plumber's uniform appeared, saying someone had called about a clogged sink. Elena had not called anyone, but before she could protest, he had fixed it and left without taking a single dollar. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Elena stood by the new window and looked down at the dark street below, and she saw it. A black car parked at the end of the block, beneath the shadow of an old oak tree. The car had no lights on. No one got in or out. It simply sat there, still and silent, like a ghost keeping watch. Elena stared at it for 10 minutes. It did not move. The next night, she looked again, and the car was still there. The night after that, the same. Elena knew who it was. She had no proof, but she knew it in her bones. And the strange thing was, she did not feel angry the way she thought she should. Instead, warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she was afraid to name. For the first time in 5 years, Elena Vasquez felt that someone was watching, protecting, caring for her and her daughter from a distance. And even if she did not want to admit it, that feeling did not feel bad at all. A week passed, and the strange changes did not stop. They multiplied. Elena came home one afternoon after her cleaning shift and found 2 workers in the living room, busy installing a brand new heater. She froze in the doorway, watching them with a wary, confused stare. "Who called you here?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. The older worker looked up and gave her a polite smile. "Someone placed the order and paid in advance. Ma'am, we are just here to install it." Then they were gone, leaving Elena standing there, with a new heater gleaming in the corner, spilling gentle warmth into a room that had always been cold. She stared at it, not knowing whether to feel grateful or furious. The next day, Elena opened the refrigerator to make dinner for Lily, and she almost dropped the bottle in her hand. The old fridge, the one that was usually half empty, was suddenly packed with fresh food. Whole milk, eggs, green vegetables, beef, salmon, and fruits Elena had never been able to afford for her daughter. She stood there with the refrigerator door hanging open, cold air blowing against her face, and she did not know what she was feeling anymore. But the moment that truly stunned her came later that afternoon, when she picked Lily up from Rosa's place. Lily ran out with bright eyes, her face glowing in a way Elena had rarely seen in all of 6 years. "Mom, Mom," Lily bounced around her, her voice overflowing with excitement. "I am transferring to a new school. St. Catherine's. Mom, do you know it? It has a huge playground, swings and slides, and the teacher said I have a special scholarship, so we do not have to pay." Elena went still. Her heart felt like someone's hand had closed around it. St. Catherine's was one of the best elementary schools in the area. 1 year of tuition cost as much as Elena's entire year of rent. Elena had walked past that school before. She had looked through the fence at children in crisp uniforms playing in the yard, and she had dreamed, just once, she had dreamed Lily might go there. But she had known it was only a dream, a special scholarship. Elena knew there was no such scholarship. That evening at the bar, Rosa called Elena into the back room before the shift began. The older woman looked at her with an expression that held both worry and curiosity. "My girl," Rosa said carefully, "starting this week, your pay is increased by half again, and you only need to work 4 nights a week instead of 6. Elena's mouth fell open. "But the bar is not doing so well that—" "It is not the bar," Rosa cut in, her gaze turning serious. "A man came to see me a few days ago. Very polite, dressed in expensive clothes, but—" Rosa stopped, choosing her words. "Frightening. The kind of frightening that comes with real power. The kind that does not need to say much to make people listen. He asked about you, about your work, about Lily. Rosa looked straight into Elena's eyes. Then he left money and said to make sure you have time to rest and take care of your daughter. Elena felt heat rush into her face. She knew who the man was. All of it. The new window, the rent, the heater, the food, Lily's school, the raise. All of it came from one person, and Elena did not know whether she felt gratitude or rage. I do not need anyone's pity, Elena said through clenched teeth, her hands tightening into fists. I told him already. I can handle my own life. Rosa let out a slow sigh. I do not think it is pity, my girl. I have lived long enough to know the difference. But Elena did not listen. She needed to speak to Dominic. She needed to make it clear she was not some charity case for him to ease his conscience. The problem was, she did not know where to find him. As if the heavens heard her, Marco appeared at the bar that night, sitting in a shadowed corner, watching as he always did. Elena recognized him immediately. Dominic's right hand. The man who had stood beside him that night. She waited until the bar thinned out, then walked up to Marco's table. I need to see Mr. Rossi, she said plainly, her voice steady. Marco lifted an eyebrow, surprised by her directness. The boss does not meet anyone without an appointment. Then give me the address. I will go myself. Marco studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something he did not say aloud. Then he took out a crisp white business card, wrote a few words on it, and slid it across the table to her. Lincoln Hill, number 12. A big iron gate. You cannot miss it. He stood, leaving a generous tip on the table. And Elena, the boss is waiting for you. Elena stood before the massive iron gate of the Lincoln Hill villa, her heart pounding, her fist clenched tight with determination. She had left Lily with Rosa, telling a small lie about an errand she needed to handle, then taken a taxi straight here after her shift. The Chicago night air was sharp and cold. Wind slipped through her thin coat, but the fire of anger in her chest was enough to keep her warm. She pressed the bell. In less than a minute, 2 large security guards in black suits appeared from inside the gate. They looked her up and down with suspicious eyes, clearly not used to a plainly dressed woman like her showing up in a place like this. Who are you? Do you have an appointment? One of them asked, his voice flat and cold. I am Elena Vasquez. I need to see Mr. Rossi, right now. The guards exchanged a look. One of them started to refuse. Then a familiar voice came from behind them. Let her in. Dominic stepped out of the darkness. He was still in his usual black suit, but the tie was gone, and his sleeves were rolled up, as if he had been in the middle of something. His gray eyes fixed on Elena. No surprise, no anger, only a calm steadiness, as if he had known she would come. The gate opened, and Elena walked in, passing the guards who watched her with confusion still written on their faces. She followed Dominic into the villa, through the familiar grand entryway, down the long hallway lined with oil paintings, until they stopped in front of his office. Dominic opened the door and motioned for her to go in first. The room was just as she remembered from that morning, when she had stood outside the doorway and watched him draw with Lily. But tonight there was no child's laughter, no crayons, no scattered sheets of paper, only tension, thick in the air. Elena stood straight in the center of the room and turned to face Dominic as he closed the door behind him. She did not sit, even when he pointed toward the chair. She wanted to stand. She wanted to be level with him. She wanted him to see that she was not someone who could be handed gifts and then expected to bow her head in silent gratitude. Why are you doing this? Elena asked bluntly, her voice trembling slightly from the effort of holding back her anger. Fixing my window, paying 3 months of my rent, installing a new heater, filling my refrigerator, moving my child to the best school in the area with this so-called special scholarship. Do you think I am stupid? Do you think I cannot see what is happening? Dominic did not answer. He only watched her with gray eyes that showed nothing. I do not need anyone's pity. Elena took a step forward, her voice rising. I am not a charity case for you to ease your conscience. I told you already. I can take care of myself. For 5 years I have raised my daughter alone. I do not need, I do not want, and I do not accept anyone's pity. Silence stretched. Dominic did not move. He let her pour out her anger without pushing back. When Elena stopped to breathe, he finally spoke, his voice low and calm in a way that felt almost strange. It is not pity. Elena let out a harsh laugh. Then what is it? You give money. You give things. You arrange my life without even asking me. And you say it is not pity. Dominic walked to the window and looked out at the Chicago night. His back to her, he stayed quiet for a long time, as if he were searching for words for something he did not fully understand himself. I do not know how to explain it, he said at last, softer than before. I only know that after that night, after meeting you and Lily, I could not look away. I could not sit in this villa, knowing you two were back in that miserable apartment with a broken window and a dead heater, and do nothing. He turned to face Elena again, and she saw something different in his cold gray eyes. Not the pride of a man handing down gifts from above, but pain, loneliness, and a longing she could not name. You and Lily remind me of Sophia, Dominic said, and his voice tightened slightly when he spoke his sister's name. You remind me there are still things worth protecting in this world. You remind me why I still want to live, why I still want to do something good in the dark world I chose. He stepped closer, stopping only a few paces from her. You are right. I did not ask you. That was my mistake. I am used to giving orders and having people obey. I forgot you are not my soldier. You are a proud, strong woman, and you deserve respect. Elena stood there as the anger inside her began to melt, like snow in sunlight. She searched Dominic's face for a crack of dishonesty, a hidden motive, anything that would give her a reason to keep fighting, but she found none. Only sincerity, raw and exposed, the kind that can be wounded. If you want me to stop, Dominic said gently, I will stop. I will pull back the men watching. I will not interfere in your life anymore. Just say the word. Silence held them again. Elena felt her heart pulled hard between logic and feeling. Then she let out a long breath, her shoulders lowering. I am not telling you to stop, she said, her voice softer now. I just want you to ask me. I want to know beforehand. I want the right to say yes or no. That is all I am asking. Dominic nodded slowly, and a small smile flickered across his mouth, the first she had seen since she walked into the room. Deal accepted. After that night of confrontation, everything began to change in a way neither Elena nor Dominic had expected. He started showing up at the small apartment where mother and daughter lived. At first, it was once a week, then twice, then 3 times, until the sight of a black Maybach parked in front of the old, worn building became familiar to the entire neighborhood. The official reason Dominic gave each time was security checks, but everyone knew it was only an excuse. Marco knew, Elena knew, and maybe even Lily knew too, though the little girl never said it out loud. She only squealed with joy whenever that familiar figure appeared at the door. The first time Dominic tried cooking in Elena's tiny kitchen became a disaster they would never forget. He stood in front of the old gas stove with the same serious face he used when negotiating a $1 million deal. He held chopsticks and stirred a pot of noodles, while his gray eyes stayed locked on the cooking book Elena had left open for him. But only 10 minutes later, thick black smoke rose in angry waves. The noodles glued themselves to the bottom of the pot like paste, and the smoke alarm screamed its harsh warning. Lily sat at the little table, clutching her stomach as she laughed so hard she almost fell off the chair. Uncle Dominic is such a terrible cook, she shouted between bright bursts of laughter. Even worse than Mom. Elena stood beside them, one hand covering her mouth as she tried not to laugh, the other hand waving smoke toward the window. She glanced at Dominic. The most powerful man in Chicago stood there wearing a rare look of confusion, his apron splattered with sauce, and she could not help it. She laughed too. In the end, they ordered pizza. They sat together on the living room floor because the table was too small for 3 people. They shared hot slices, and they laughed again at the cooking disaster. And strangely, it became one of the happiest dinners Elena had known in 5 years. After that, Lily began pulling Dominic into her world in a way no one else ever had. She taught him how to play with dolls, and Elena never forgot the sight of it. The infamous Mafia boss, sitting flat on the floor, legs crossed, holding 2 Barbie dolls in his hands, making them talk to each other in a high, squeaky voice he struggled to imitate. Then came the pretend tea party. Lily set out a pink plastic tea set. She poured invisible tea into tiny cups. She invited Uncle Dominic with solemn seriousness, as if the whole thing were a formal event. Dominic held the ridiculously small plastic cup between his rough fingers, lifted it to his mouth, and pretended to drink as if it were real. "Wrong!" Lily yelled, pointing at his hand. "You have to lift your pinky when you drink tea, like a princess." And Dominic, the man the entire Chicago underworld feared, the man who had once made the most hardened enemies beg for their lives, obediently lifted his pinky. His face was serious, as if this were the most important rule in the world. Marco stood outside the apartment door, ordered to keep watch as always, and he had to turn his face away. His shoulders shook as he tried to hold back laughter. 20 years with Dominic. He had seen his boss kill without hesitation. He had seen his boss negotiate deals worth hundreds of millions with an expression as cold as ice. But never, not once, had he seen his boss sipping pretend tea with dolls, pinky raised like a princess. Elena watched it all from the corner of the room, and her heart softened a little more with every moment. She watched her daughter laugh with Dominic. She watched Lily's eyes shine with a pure happiness Elena had never seen before, and she realized this was what she had always wanted for her child. Not money, not a mansion, a man's presence in Lily's life, someone willing to sit on the floor and play dolls with her. One evening, after a long day of school at her new place and hours of play with Uncle Dominic, Lily climbed into bed but refused to sleep. "Mom, tell Uncle Dominic to tell me a story," Lily begged, her brown eyes already heavy with sleep, yet still fighting to stay open. Elena was about to refuse. She was about to say Uncle Dominic was busy, but Dominic sat down on the edge of the bed and picked up the fairy tale book from the nightstand. "Which story do you want?" he asked, and his voice was gentle in a way Elena still was not used to hearing from him. "Sleeping Beauty," Lily cried, then yawned long and deep. Dominic began to read. His low, warm voice filled the small room, telling of a princess under a curse and the prince who came to break it. He read slowly. Sometimes he shifted his voice for different characters, and Lily curled beneath the blanket, her eyes drifting closed. Elena stood outside the bedroom door, her back resting against the frame, listening quietly to Dominic reading, and without meaning to, tears slid down her face. Daniel, Lily's biological father, had never done this. Not once. Not in the entire year they lived together had he sat down and read a story to his daughter. He was always too busy, too tired, too indifferent. But this man, a stranger she had only known for a few weeks, sat there patiently, turning page after page, reading until Lily fell asleep. Everything was starting to feel too perfect, and Elena should have known that life had never allowed anything perfect to last for long. That night, she was wiping down tables at Rosa's bar. Her mind was still drifting through the memory of the night before, when Dominic had read a fairy tale to Lily until the child fell asleep. Then the television mounted on the wall pulled her attention like a hook. "Breaking news tonight. Federal investigators have just opened a new investigation targeting Dominic Rossi, the notorious boss of the Rossi Mafia family, one of the largest criminal organizations in Chicago. Mr. Rossi is suspected of involvement in large-scale money laundering and multiple unsolved cases." Elena went still in the middle of the bar. The cleaning cloth slipped from her fingers, and she did not even notice. On the screen, Dominic's image appeared. The photo was clearly taken from a distance, captured as he stepped out of some building. He wore his black suit like he always did, but the gray eyes in that picture were cold enough to freeze the air. Nothing like the man who had sipped pretend tea with her daughter. Nothing like the man who had carried Lily as she dozed against his shoulder. The Rossi family is believed to have controlled much of Chicago's underground activity for 3 generations, the announcer continued. Dominic Rossi, 36 years old, is considered the most ruthless and shrewd boss in the family's history. Many sources report that he has been directly connected to multiple mysterious disappearances of rivals in recent years. Elena's head spun. She had to grip the edge of a table just to stay upright. Her heart slammed wildly against her ribs. Mafia. He was Mafia. Not a wealthy businessman, the way she had quietly assumed. Not a powerful man who still lived on the right side of decency. A criminal. A crime boss. And she had let her daughter grow close to him. She ended her shift early. She brushed off Rosa's worry. Then she ran all the way home. Lily was asleep in the bedroom, deep and peaceful, unaware of the storm twisting inside her mother. Elena sat there all night, watching her daughter sleep, replaying every moment from the past few weeks. The next morning, when Dominic appeared at the door like he always did, Elena was already waiting. She stood in the doorway, blocking his way in. Her brown eyes burned with anger tangled tightly with fear. "Are you Mafia?" Her voice shook, but she forced the words out with iron will. "Do you kill people?" Dominic froze. For an instant, surprise flickered through his gray eyes. Then the calm mask slid back into place. He did not seem shocked that she knew, as if he had expected this day to come. "You watched the news," he said. It was not a question. "Answer me," Elena almost shouted. "Are you a killer?" A silence stretched, sharp and painful. Then Dominic nodded, slow and unmistakable. "I am who you think I am. I will not deny it." Elena felt as if someone had punched her in the stomach. Even though she already knew, even though she had heard the report say it plainly, hearing him admit it with his own mouth still left her reeling. "But I am not a monster. Dominic continued, his voice low and steady. There are principles I do not break. The Rossi family does not deal drugs. We do not touch women and children, and the ones who do those things, the ones who sell drugs to children, the ones who traffic people, the ones who hurt women, we punish them. He stepped closer by 1 pace. Elena stepped back by 1 pace, keeping distance. This world is not black and white, Elena. I do things the law calls wrong, but I also protect people who need protecting. People the police cannot protect, or will not protect. Who do you think keeps the South Side from being drowned in drugs? Who do you think makes sure human trafficking crews do not operate in this city? Elena shook her head. Tears started to spill. I do not care who you protect. I only care about my daughter. How can I trust you? How can I let my child be near a criminal? Dominic looked at her, and in his gray eyes Elena saw pain. Not anger at being rejected, not wounded pride at being called a criminal. The pain of a man watching something precious slip out of his hands. You do not have to believe my words, he said softly. Look at actions. In these past weeks, have I harmed you or Lily? Have I ever threatened you, forced you, done anything that made either of you afraid? Elena did not answer. She could not, because the truth was no. Dominic had never done anything that made her or Lily afraid. Instead, he had given them a sense of safety and a kind of care they had never truly known. I need time, Elena finally said. Her voice was tired now, scraped raw. I need to think. And while I do, please do not come to see us. Do not contact us. Do not. Her throat tightened. Do not let Lily see you. Dominic stood very still. His face looked carved from stone. Then he nodded. Slow and controlled. All right, I will respect your decision. He turned and walked away. Elena closed the door. She leaned her back against it, and tears ran down her face in heavy streams. From inside the bedroom, Lily's voice carried out. Mom, is Uncle Dominic coming today? 1 week passed without Dominic, and the small apartment suddenly felt empty in a way Elena had never expected. There was no longer Lily's bright, ringing laughter when she played with Uncle Dominic. There were no more chaotic dinners with a pot of noodles burned black. No more pretend tea parties with dolls and a pinky held high. The apartment was the same as it had always been, but something had been taken out of it. Lily was the first to notice, and she asked again and again, every day, every hour, until Elena felt she could cover her ears just to escape the sound of it. Mom, why is Uncle Dominic not coming? Lily asked on the first morning, her big brown eyes fixed on Elena with pure confusion. He is busy, baby, Elena said, avoiding her daughter's gaze. Busy with what? Lily pressed. He was not busy when he read stories to me. He was not busy when he played dolls with me. Elena did not know what to say. She only pulled Lily into her arms and kissed her soft brown curls. On the second day, Lily asked again. On the third day, she asked again. By the fourth day, she started to cry. Mom, is Uncle Dominic mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Why is he not coming anymore? Lily sobbed, tears soaking the pillow. He promised me. He said he would come back. He said he would never lie to me. Elena held her daughter tighter, pain flashing through her chest like a blade. She wanted to explain. She wanted to tell Lily that Uncle Dominic was a bad man, a criminal, someone dangerous, someone a child should not be near. But when she looked into Lily's red, swollen eyes, when she saw the clean, simple heartbreak of a 6-year-old who had lost someone she loved, Elena could not force the words out. By the end of the week, Lily stopped asking. The little girl grew quiet. She folded in on herself. She no longer laughed or chattered about school the way she used to. Each night, instead of begging Elena to read a story, Lily sat silently and drew in the notebook Uncle Dominic had bought for her. One night, after Lily fell asleep, Elena picked up the notebook and turned the pages one by one. She wanted to see what her daughter was drawing. She wanted to understand her child's heart through those uneven lines of color. And then Elena froze when she reached the last page. Lily had drawn a small house with a red roof and blue windows, exactly like their apartment. In front of the house stood 3 people side by side, holding hands, all of them smiling. The smallest figure in the middle, with brown curly hair, was clearly Lily. On the left stood a woman with long hair, Elena. On the right stood a tall man with black hair, wearing a suit. Beneath the drawing, in the crooked handwriting of a 6-year-old still learning to write, Lily had written, my family. Mom, me, and Uncle Dominic. Elena sank onto the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in her hands. and she cried. She cried because her daughter had already placed Dominic inside the word family. She cried because she had been the one to pull that man's presence out of Lily's life. And she cried because she did not know whether she had been right or wrong. The next evening, after the bar closed, Elena finally spoke to Rosa. Rosa listened without interrupting. Then when Elena finished, the older woman sighed and took Elena's hand. "My girl," Rosa said, her voice warm with experience. "I have lived in this neighborhood for more than 30 years. I know who the Rossi family is. I know what they do. But I also know this world is not as clean and simple as a fairy tale." She looked straight into Elena's eyes. "Daniel, Lily's father, said sweet things. He promised a future. But what did he do? He abandoned you and the child, and left behind debt and pain. And that other man, he has a frightening reputation. He has a dark past. But what have his actions been toward you and Lily?" Elena fell silent, thinking about Rosa's words. "Do not let someone's past be the only thing you use to judge their present," Rosa continued. "Look at how a person treats that little girl. That is what matters." That night, back at home, Elena sat beside Lily's bed and watched her sleep. She looked at the family drawing Lily had made. She looked at the small face, still marked with the faint trace of dried tears, and she made a decision. She needed to speak to Dominic again. At the very least, she had to give him the chance to explain. She had to hear more. She had to look into his eyes and judge for herself, for her daughter, for herself, and for something in her heart she did not dare to name. Elena stood before the familiar iron gate of the Lincoln Hill villa, her fingers gripping Lily's drawing as if she were holding her whole heart in her hands. She had spent the entire night thinking, turning over and over on her bed, watching her daughter sleep, looking at the crooked little family picture, and at last she had made a decision she knew would change her life forever. The guards recognized her immediately and opened the gate without questions, as if they had been told in advance that this woman was always welcome. Elena stepped inside. She walked the familiar white gravel path. Then she stopped at the front door. She had not even lifted her hand to knock when the door opened. Dominic was standing there. Elena almost did not recognize him. The powerful man who was always immaculate in expensive suits now looked like a ghost of himself, a shadow left behind. His beard had grown in, rough across his sharp jaw. Dark circles sat deep beneath his eyes, as if he had not slept for many nights. His shirt was wrinkled, like he had worn it through the night and never changed. But when those gray eyes saw Elena, they lit up in a way she had never witnessed before. "Elena," he breathed, his voice hoarse from disuse. Marco stood behind him in the entry hall, and he glanced at Elena with a quiet, grateful look. Elena understood at once. His boss had not been all right this past week, and her presence was the thing he had been waiting for. "I need to talk to you," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady even as her heart hammered. Dominic nodded. He stepped aside to let her in, then guided her into the living room instead of the office, the way he usually did. Maybe he did not want the space to feel too formal. Maybe he was simply too tired to care. They sat across from each other, the distance between their chairs like an ocean neither of them knew how to cross. Elena looked down at the drawing in her hands. She took a deep breath. Then she lifted her eyes. "She misses you," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly. "Every day she asks about you. Every day she draws this." She handed him the picture. Dominic took it with hands that trembled a little. He looked down at the crooked lines, the small house, the 3 figures holding hands, the words "my family" written beneath, and Elena watched those cold gray eyes turn wet, shimmering under the light. He did not cry, but he nearly did, and the sight stabbed Elena's heart with pain. "And I have been thinking about you too," she went on, her voice softer now. "Every day, every night, I tried to hate you. I tried to believe I was right to send you away, but I cannot." Dominic looked up at her, his eyes filled with emotions he had never allowed himself to show. Elena stood. She moved closer. Then she sat down beside him. "I do not understand your world," she said honestly. "I am afraid of it. I am afraid of what you do, of the enemies you have, of the danger around you. But," she paused, searching for the right words, "but I understand how you treat my child. She has never had a father. Daniel, the man who helped create her, was never truly a father. But you, a stranger, you gave her the feeling of being protected, being loved, being cared for, in a way that I, no matter how hard I tried, could never give her alone." Tears began to slide down Elena's cheeks, and she did not wipe them away. "I want to try," she said, her voice breaking. "Not because I need anyone to save me, I have saved myself for 5 years, and I will keep doing that. But I want to try because I do not want to be alone anymore. Because my daughter deserves a whole family. And because you," she looked straight into Dominic's eyes, "because you are the first man who has made me want to open my heart after 5 years of keeping it locked shut." Dominic set the drawing down on the table. Then he lifted a hand and gently raised Elena's chin. He looked into her brown eyes, shining with tears, and in his gray eyes Elena saw every last wall collapse. "You know who I am," he whispered, his voice rough. "You know how dangerous my world is, and you are still here." "I am still here," Elena repeated. Dominic tilted his head, and his mouth met hers. Their first kiss was as light as a butterfly settling on a flower, trembling, full of feelings held in for too long. Elena closed her eyes and felt the warmth of his lips. She felt his hand rest softly against her cheek, as if she were something precious he feared he might break if he touched too hard. When they pulled apart, Dominic rested his forehead against hers, his breath hot on her mouth. "I will protect you both," he whispered, and his voice sounded like a vow. "With everything I have, with my life if I have to. You and Lily will never be hurt again, I promise." The next 2 months became the happiest stretch of Elena's life, and perhaps they were the only time Dominic Rossi truly lived, instead of merely existing. They did not rush. They did not force anything. They let it unfold the way water finds its way to the sea. Elena kept the small apartment on the south side, because she needed that independence. But most evenings and weekends, she and Lily stayed at the Lincoln Hill villa. Lily was so happy she seemed like an entirely different child. She laughed more. She talked more. And her brown eyes always lit up whenever she saw Uncle Dominic. She had her own room in the villa now, painted purple, exactly the way she wanted. A princess bed, a wardrobe full of dolls. Dominic changed too. In a way, Marco, who had followed him for 20 years, never expected. He was still the cold, ruthless boss at work. But every time he came home, every time he saw Elena and Lily, those gray eyes softened, like snow melting under spring sunlight. He learned to cook, even though he still burned pots more often than he wanted to admit. He learned to read fairy tales, changing his voice for every character. He learned to play dolls. He learned to drink pretend tea with his pinky raised like a princess. And he laughed. He truly laughed. In a way he thought he had forgotten after Sophia was gone. But happiness, as Elena had learned from a life shaped by storms, never lasts forever. The ghost of the past always finds a way back. And this time, it came wearing the face of Daniel Morrison. 5 years after he abandoned his wife and child with a cold note and a mountain of debt, Daniel showed up again in Chicago, not because he was sorry, not because he missed them. He came back because he was running. Over the years, he had drifted from place to place, gambling, scamming, piling up more debt like an addict who could not stop. Now he owed Tony Marchetti, the boss of the biggest rival gang to the Rossi family, $2 million in gambling losses. Marchetti was not a patient man. He gave Daniel 1 week to pay, along with a threat that if the money did not appear, Daniel would disappear from the earth in the most literal sense. Desperate, Daniel began searching for a way to get money, and in that search, he discovered something interesting. Elena, the ex-wife he had walked away from, was now living with Dominic Rossi, the sworn enemy of Marchetti. Daniel was a coward, but he was not stupid. He saw an opportunity, not only to erase his debt, but to profit. He contacted Marchetti and offered a deal. "I have a way to get close to Dominic Rossi," he said, his voice shaking on the phone, trying to sound confident. "Through the woman and the little girl. The girl is my daughter. I have legal rights." Marchetti was silent for a moment. Then he gave a cold, amused laugh. "Go on. You clear my debt," Daniel said, "and I will deliver the perfect hostage to bring Rossi down." The deal was accepted. But what Daniel did not know was that Dominic had men tracking Marchetti's movements for a long time. Marco received a report about that suspicious call quickly. He began digging deeper into Daniel Morrison, and what he found made both him and Dominic go still. "Boss," Marco said in the office, his voice heavy, "Daniel Morrison is the one behind the attack on Elena that night." Dominic looked up from the stack of papers. His gray eyes darkened. "Explain." "He hired 3 thugs to take Elena," Marco said. "The original plan was ransom, or if that failed, to sell her to Marchetti to reduce his debt. He knew Marchetti likes collecting beautiful women." Marco swallowed, then continued. "The plan failed because Lily escaped and, by chance, stopped the boss's car. If not for that, Elena probably would have—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Dominic understood. The room fell into a terrifying silence. Dominic did not explode. He did not slam his fist on the desk. He did not shout. He just sat there, quiet. And Marco felt a chill crawl along his spine, because he knew this was the most frightening kind of anger his boss possessed. Cold, calculated, an anger that would not fade until the person who caused it paid the price. He dared to touch what is mine, Dominic finally said, his voice like ice. He almost killed Elena. He almost made Lily an orphan, and now he plans to use them as hostages. Dominic stood and walked to the window, staring out at Chicago drowning in darkness. Increase security for Elena and Lily, he said. Double the men. Do not let your attention slip for even 1 second. And Daniel Morrison? Marco asked. Dominic turned back. The look in his eyes made Marco, a man who had witnessed countless scenes of violence over 20 years, feel his stomach tighten. Find him, but do not touch him yet. I want to know every plan he and Marchetti are making first. He paused, his voice so cold it seemed to freeze the air. Then I will handle it myself. That day began like any other ordinary day. Elena took Lily to St. Catherine in the morning. She kissed her goodbye at the school gate like she always did. She watched the small figure in a navy blue uniform run into the playground with a bright, open smile. She did not know it would be the last time she would see her daughter smile like that for many terrifying hours to come. Elena was cleaning offices downtown when her phone rang. The school number. She answered with a smile, thinking Lily had forgotten something, or the teacher wanted to ask about something small. But the panicked voice on the other end froze that smile right on her lips. Miss Vasquez. This is Miss Thompson, Lily's teacher. I am sorry. I am truly sorry. The woman's voice shook, close to tears. A man came to the school about 1 hour ago. His name is Daniel Morrison. He claimed to be Lily's father. I refused at first, but he had legal documents. Miss Vasquez. They looked official, stamped by the court, stating he had been granted immediate emergency custody. He told us you had been in a severe car accident and were in critical condition. We tried to call your phone immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. He was screaming, causing a scene, saying Lily needed to see you before it was too late. Under the circumstances, and with the court papers in hand, I let him take her. Elena did not hear anything after that. The phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull sound, but she did not notice. The world around her seemed to collapse. Sound disappeared. Light dimmed. Only one thought remained, screaming inside her head. Daniel. He took her child. 5 years of hiding. 5 years of vanishing. And he came back, not to apologize, not to make things right, but to kidnap the daughter he had never loved. Elena did not know how she picked up the phone, how she ran out of the building. She only knew that when she stopped at a street corner, gasping for air, the phone in her hand vibrated with a new message. From an unknown number. She opened it with trembling hands, and her heart tore open. A photo. Lily was tied to a chair, her hands bound, her mouth sealed with tape. Her big brown eyes were red from crying, tears streaming down her round cheeks. She was not hurt, but the fear in those eyes made Elena want to scream until her throat broke. Under the photo was a cold message. $5 million. Elena must come alone. The location will be sent later. If the police or Rossi's men show up, the girl dies. Elena called Dominic without thinking. It was instinct. It was reflex. The reflex of someone who had learned to trust and lean on another person after years of loneliness. Dominic answered on the first ring, as if he had been holding the phone and waiting. Elena. What is it? Elena tried to speak, but her voice would not form. Only strangled sobs pushed their way out of her throat. She tried again, forcing each word out. Lily. Daniel. He took her. Dominic. He took my child. Silence on the other end lasted 1 second. 2. Then Dominic's voice came through, cold enough that Elena almost did not recognize it. It was the voice of a Mafia boss, the voice of the man who made all of Chicago fear him, the voice of someone who could kill without hesitation. But when he spoke to her, that voice softened, warm and steady in the only way he could manage in a moment like this. Listen to me, he said, each word clear and unshakable. I will find Lily. I promise you. Stay where you are. I will send someone to pick you up right away. Then he hung up, and Elena knew the storm was about to fall. In the office at the Lincoln Hill Villa, Dominic rose to his feet, his gray eyes frozen into ice. He called Marco in, and Marco did not need more than one look at his boss's face to know something terrible had happened. Mobilize everyone, Dominic ordered, his voice holding not a single trace of emotion. Not 50, 100 men. Everyone who can hold a gun. Marco nodded and pulled out his phone immediately. Dominic continued. Call Detective Carter. Tell him I need every piece of information on Daniel Morrison within 1 hour. Where he is, who he is contacting, what he is doing, everything. And the demand for $5 million, Marco asked as he dialed. Dominic turned, and the look in his eyes made Marco swallow. Money is not the problem. Have it ready if we need it to buy time. He paused, his voice dropping into a whisper that sounded like death itself. But Daniel Morrison will not live to spend a single dollar of it. He dared to lay hands on my daughter. 6 hours passed like 6 years in hell. 100 of Dominic's men spread across Chicago, turning over every street corner, every alley, every abandoned building where Daniel might hide. Detective Carter pulled every string he had inside the police department. He tracked traffic cameras. He checked every financial move Daniel had made in the past 24 hours. Elena sat inside the Lincoln Hill villa, guarded carefully by 2 security men, but she could not stay still. She paced like a trapped animal. Her eyes were raw from crying. Her hands would not stop shaking. Every minute without news was another minute in fire. Every phone ring made her heart stop, then slam again when she realized it was not Lily. Then, at last, in the 6th hour, Marco called with the information they had been praying for. One of Marchetti's men had been caught and under pressure from Rossi interrogators had given up the location. Daniel was holding Lily in an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district on the south side of the city, a place Marchetti often used to store illegal goods. Dominic prepared to leave immediately, and Elena rushed forward and grabbed his hand, her eyes begging. I am coming with you. Please, she needs to see her mother. Dominic stopped and turned to her, and what surprised Elena was how those cold gray eyes softened when they landed on her. He lifted his hand and brushed her cheek, wiping away the tear still clinging there. You stay here, he said, gentle but firm. Safe. Where I am going is not for you. I will bring her back to you. I promise. Then he turned and walked away, and Elena could only stand there watching him go, her heart hanging between hope and despair. 20 minutes later, Dominic's convoy stopped about 200 meters from the warehouse. The industrial district was empty in the night, lit only by a few weak streetlights that threw pale light over decaying buildings and rusted container yards. The target warehouse was a gray concrete shell. Its corrugated roof was punched through in places. The iron doors were rusted. A dim light leaking from inside proved someone was there. Dominic ordered every exit sealed. Then he prepared to lead the assault team in. He removed his suit jacket just long enough to fasten a thin, high-grade Kevlar vest tight against his chest, hidden beneath his black shirt. He buttoned the jacket back up, concealing the armor. No helmet, he needed to move fast and see clearly. But he was not foolish enough to walk into a trap unprotected. With a pistol at his back, and gray eyes cold as ice, he signaled the team to move. Marco stayed close beside him, worried, but he did not dare to argue. They broke in through the back door and slipped inside like ghosts. The warehouse was wide and hollow. A few rotting wooden crates were stacked in one corner. A single hanging bulb threw sick yellow light over the center. There, Daniel Morrison stood with a knife in his hand, the blade pressed tight against Lily's throat. Her hands were tied behind her back. Her mouth was no longer taped, but her eyes were red and swollen. Her face was soaked with tears. Around Daniel stood 5 of Marchetti's men, each holding a gun, their expressions shifting with sudden unease as Rossi's men flooded in. They knew they were outnumbered. They knew that outside those walls, 100 men were waiting. Daniel spoke first, his voice shaking even as he tried to sound vicious. Back up. All of you back up or I kill the girl. His grip tightened on the knife. He yanked Lily closer, using her like a shield. Lily screamed when she felt the cold blade against the skin of her neck. Uncle Dominic, I am scared. Lily's cry cut through the space like a blade driven straight into Dominic's heart. He stood there about 10 paces away, and the past surged into his mind like a flood. His mother, Maria Rossi, had once been used as a hostage like this, a knife at her throat, kidnappers threatening to kill her if they did not get their money. And his father had stood cold and unbending, refusing, letting the Rossi family's principles kill the woman he loved. But Dominic was not his father. He stepped forward, one slow step at a time, calm and crushing, his gray eyes never leaving Daniel. Let the girl go, Dominic said, his voice low and steady, like a death bell. This is between me and you. She is innocent. She has nothing to do with your debts or Marchetti's schemes. Daniel stumbled back 1 step, his face going pale with fear. Do not come closer. I will kill her. I am not joking. You will not kill anyone, Dominic kept walking, because you are a coward. You abandoned your wife and child when she was only 1 year old. You hired men to kidnap Elena for ransom. You used your own daughter as a hostage to save your life. And you think you have the guts to kill? Daniel panicked. The hand holding the knife began to shake. And in that brief instant when his focus slipped, a gunshot cracked through the warehouse. Marco, positioned at the edge with a perfect line of sight, pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through Daniel's right arm with precise accuracy. Daniel screamed in pain. The knife hit the concrete with a sharp metallic clatter. Dominic moved like an arrow. In a single instant, he ripped Lily away from Daniel's grasp. He crushed her into his arms. One hand covered her eyes. One hand pressed her head to his chest so Lily would not have to see the violence that erupted as his men surged in to restrain Daniel and Marchetti's crew. "Close your eyes, sweetheart," Dominic whispered into Lily's ear, his voice shaking with emotion. "I am here. I am keeping you safe. No one can hurt you anymore." Lily sobbed against him, her small hands clutching his suit jacket as if she feared he might disappear. Dominic held her tighter. He felt her frantic heartbeat begin to settle, and he knew that this time, he had not failed. He looked up at Daniel writhing on the floor, cuffed, blood spilling from his wounded arm. His men waited for a command, ready to end Daniel if Dominic said the word. But Dominic shook his head. "Turn him over to the police," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Kidnapping a child, extortion, conspiracy with a criminal organization. He will rot in prison for at least 20 years. Dominic looked down at Daniel one last time, contempt filling his gray eyes. "Death is too easy. Too fast. For someone like you." The black Maybach tore through the Chicago night at a speed it had never carried before. Dominic sat in the back seat with Lily curled in his arms, her small hand still clutching his suit jacket as if she feared he might vanish. She had stopped crying, but she was still trembling. Every so often a small sob slipped out of her. Dominic held her tighter, whispering reassurance into her ear the whole way home, and he realized something he had never understood in his life before. For the first time, he knew what it meant to want to protect someone with his own life. When the car stopped in front of the Lincoln Hill villa, the front door flew open before Dominic could even step out. Elena burst out like a storm. Her black hair was wild and tangled. Her eyes were swollen from hours of crying. Her face was pale from worry and sleeplessness. She ran down the granite steps, stumbling so hard she nearly fell, but she did not slow down. "Lily, my baby," Elena screamed, her voice breaking with feeling. At her mother's voice, Lily lifted her head from Dominic's chest, and when she saw Elena, she started crying again. Mom," Dominic set Lily down, and the little girl shot toward her mother like a small bullet. Elena dropped to her knees to catch her, and mother and daughter crashed into each other, sobbing in the middle of the courtyard under warm golden lights. "Mom, I was so scared," Lily cried. "But Uncle Dominic came and saved me. He was like a superhero, Mom. He came and told me to close my eyes, and then he held me and said no one could hurt me anymore." Elena squeezed her daughter even tighter. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She kissed Lily's brown curls, kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her nose, as if she needed to make sure the child was truly here, truly safe, truly home. Dominic stepped back a few paces, giving them space. He watched them holding each other, and his chest filled with something he did not know how to name. Not joy, not relief, something deeper, a sense of belonging, a sense that he had finally found home. Elena lifted her head, her brown eyes soaked with tears, searching for Dominic. When their eyes met, she rose slowly, still holding Lily's hand, and walked toward him. "You saved my child," she said, her voice trembling. "Twice. The first time in that dark alley, and now again. How can I ever—" Dominic shook his head. He stepped closer and lifted his hand to her cheek, his thumb brushing away the tear sliding down. "You do not owe me anything," he said, his voice soft in a way only Elena and Lily ever heard. "I did not do this so you would owe me. I did it because I love that little girl." He paused, drew a slow breath, then looked straight into Elena's eyes. "And because I love you." Those 3 words hung in the air, heavy, full of meaning. The first time Dominic said them, the first time he admitted what they both knew, what neither of them had dared to name. Elena went still. Lily looked up at the adults with eyes still red from crying, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to stop turning. Then Dominic did something no one expected. The notorious Mafia boss of Chicago, the man the entire city feared, slowly lowered to one knee in front of Elena and Lily, not in his expensive office, not in a high-end restaurant, right there in the courtyard, under warm lights and a sky full of stars. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small black velvet box. He opened it. Inside was a ring, not a giant, showy diamond the way people might imagine a mafia boss would give. A small diamond, delicate and understated, set on a slim band of white gold. Perfect for Elena. "I know I am not perfect," Dominic said, and his voice trembled slightly. Something Marco, watching from a distance, would never have believed if he had not seen it with his own eyes. "I have a dark past. I have enemies. I bring danger everywhere I go. I am not a prince from the fairy tales Lily loves." He lifted his gaze to Elena, and those gray eyes were filled with honesty and love. "But I promise, I will use everything I have, all my power, all my money, all my strength, to protect you both. No one will hurt you or that little girl again, not while I am still breathing." He looked at Lily, standing beside her mother, her wide eyes bright with shock. "Elena, will you let me be your husband?" Then he turned to the child. "And Lily, will you let me be your father?" Silence held for exactly 1 second. Then Lily shattered it with a scream that echoed across the courtyard. "Yes, yes. Mom, say yes. I want Uncle Dominic to be my dad." Elena laughed through her tears, the first laugh she had made in many horrifying hours. She looked down at Dominic kneeling before her. She looked at the simple ring in the velvet box. She looked at the gray eyes waiting for her answer with all the worry he tried to hide. "Yes," she whispered. Then she said it louder. "Yes, I say yes." Dominic slid the ring onto Elena's finger, his hands trembling slightly. Then he rose and pulled Elena and Lily into his arms, holding tight to the two most important people in his life. They stood there, the three of them, clinging to one another in the courtyard beneath the Chicago stars. And inside that warm circle of arms, Lily tilted her face up, her brown eyes glowing with the purest happiness. "Dad," she whispered for the first time, trying the word on her tongue as if tasting the sweetest candy. "Daddy." Dominic froze. His whole body went still. And then, for the first time in 26 years since his mother died, tears rolled down the cheeks of the most feared mafia boss in Chicago. 1 year after that fateful night, life for all three of them had changed completely, in ways no one could have imagined. Daniel Morrison was sentenced to 15 years in prison for child kidnapping, extortion, and a long list of other charges the police uncovered during the investigation. He would rot in federal prison, with more than enough time to think about what he had done to the woman he once called his wife, and to the little girl he had never deserved to be called father to. Elena returned to college, pursuing interior design, the major she had been forced to abandon 5 years earlier when Daniel walked away. Every morning she woke in the Lincoln Hill villa, looked down at the wedding ring on her hand, and still could not believe how much her life had changed. She no longer had to work 2 or 3 jobs at once. She no longer had to count out coins at the end of the month. She no longer had to worry about rent or food for her child. But more important than all of that, she was no longer alone. Lily now had her own room in the villa, painted purple, the color she had dreamed about for years. On the wall, framed with care, hung the crooked drawing she had made 1 year before, the picture of a small house and 3 people holding hands, the words "my family still clear" beneath it. Dominic had that picture framed in the most expensive oak frame money could buy, and he hung it in the most honored place in Lily's room, like a reminder of the road that had brought them to each other. Dominic and Elena's wedding took place in the villa garden on a spring afternoon. Small, warm, only the closest people. Rosa cried through the entire ceremony, wiping her tears again and again with a lace handkerchief she said had belonged to her mother. Marco stood as best man, awkward and stiff in a brand new suit, but his eyes shone with real joy as he watched his boss happy for the first time in so many years. Lily was the flower girl, wearing a white dress that puffed out like a real princess gown, holding a basket and scattering rose petals along the aisle. 1 month after the wedding, Dominic officially adopted Lily, completing every legal step. The little girl now carried the Rossi name, and every time Dominic looked at the new birth certificate with the words Lily Rossi printed on it, he felt his heart beat harder. Lily called him Dad as naturally as breathing, as if she had said it all her life, and every time he heard that word, Dominic felt warmth bloom in his chest in a way he had never thought he could still feel. One night, about 1 year after everything, the 3 of them stood on the villa balcony, looking out over Chicago glowing with lights below. Lily had fallen asleep in Dominic's arms, her brown curls spilling over his shoulder, her breathing steady and peaceful. Elena leaned against her husband, one hand resting lightly on her daughter's back, One hand threaded through Dominic's hand. They stood in silence, needing no words, simply taking in the rare quiet of peace. Dominic lifted his eyes to the night sky, and in his mind, he whispered to Sophia, the sister he still missed every day. "Sophia, I kept my promise. I found someone to love. I do not live like a corpse anymore. You can rest now." As if she could hear the thought in her husband's head, Elena looked up at him, her brown eyes gentle in the moonlight. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic looked down at his wife, then at the little girl asleep in his arms. "I am thinking about that night," he whispered. "The night a 6-year-old girl ran into the street and stopped my car. She did not know that she was saving someone dead. I had been dead for a long time, Elena. Since my mother died, since Sophia closed her eyes. I was only existing, not living, until I met you both." Elena rose and kissed her husband's cheek. A warm kiss full of love. "We saved each other," she whispered. "I died a little too after Daniel left. You gave me a reason to believe in love again." They stood there, 3 people, a family formed not by blood, but by fate, by choice, and by love. In the darkness of Chicago, the coldest Mafia boss had found something no one expected. A family, not by blood, by choice, by the pure love of a 6-year-old girl, the child who had dared to stop a black Maybach in the night and beg with all the desperation in her small heart, "Save my mom." The story of Dominic, Elena, and Lily had come to an end, but the lessons it left behind would echo in our hearts for a long time. Life sometimes pushes us into the darkest corners, but it is in that darkness that the light of love and courage shines the brightest. Lily taught us that sometimes the smallest person can do the greatest thing. Elena showed us the strength of a mother, of a woman who never gives up no matter how cruel life becomes. And Dominic proved that no one is entirely evil, that even the most frozen heart can melt when it meets the right person. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, tap like, and share this video so more people can hear moving stories like this every day. We would truly love to know how you feel about this story. Have you ever had moments when a stranger suddenly became family? Do you believe love can change a person? Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. We are always eager to hear what comes from the deepest parts of your heart. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the final minute. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peace each day. Always believe in the good, because sometimes miracles come from the places we least expect. Just like a